I was a student here at Monroe County Community College, and in that time I'd be spending time at the cafeteria in between classes, where we're going to be today, those of you that are staying for lunch, and I'd be thinking about my future and what my future held. And one of the things we studied, I'd be looking in economics class, and we'd be looking at the usual kind of things, supply and demand, right? And then there was another idea that we learned about, and it was called programmed obsolescence. It was introduced, and I was fascinated with that idea. In philosophy, we were studying things that were very complicated. The phrase, I am. Ponder that one for a moment, right? And in political science, I was learning about capitalism and government, and a term called advocacy. An idea of one person, just one person, speaking out for another. There was a young lawyer in the news frequently at that time. Remember, this is the late 60s, early 70s. He was from out east, and he was speaking about companies being accountable for safety in their products. And he spoke of people taking an active role in their government. He filled me with the interest in helping people who had a tough time helping themselves. And after a while, I found a way to become a professional advocate myself, and that was in the field of social work. So, without further ado, today, ladies and gentlemen, it is with my utmost respect and gratitude I introduce you to a graduate of Harvard Law School, an esteemed author, one of what Time magazine refers to as the top 100 most influential people in the United States, the person who reinvented the term consumer advocate, celebrating his 35th year as an advocate and voice for all, Mr. Ralph Nader.
You've been here, of course, discussing with your Attorney General and others about health care for older people and related issues of consumer fraud. I'd just like to make a number of points about these issues in a broader context before I get more specific. Almost 30 years ago, we worked with Maggie Kuhn, who started the Gray Panthers, as many of you know. Great social worker. She was asked to retire at age 65 by her church, and she said, I'm not ready to retire. And she started a group deliberately called the Gray Panthers in order to break the stereotypes of the society directed toward older people. She coined the phrase ageism to indicate that type of discrimination. She even had a panther scream that she would start with. She spoke to people. She was on Johnny Carson's show several times and traveled a couple 100,000 miles a year, all the way until she was in her late 80s. And she's considered a legend by people who are carrying on after her passing with various chapters of the Great Panthers around the country. But what I learned from her was that there really needs to be, for want of a better phrase, a cultural revolution about how older people work and operate in society. We have a very youth-oriented culture. Madison Avenue, the advertisements, we see it all the time. And there has been this sense that after you retire, you go out to pasture, you play mahjong or bridge, and you go to Sun City, Arizona, if you can afford it. And basically, you're just out of sight, out of mind. Now, this was the product of a lot of economic forces to begin building that stretched out the space where people could go to work, and the extended family began disintegrating. Grandmother, grandfather, aunt, uncle, they lived far apart from their children, grandchildren. The communities began disintegrating because of the way jobs were developed. With the car, people could commute. You had shopping malls, the little integrated community where you lived and you shopped, and you had the local stores, for the most part, just a memory. And that all produced one massive phenomenon, and it's called loneliness. Massive loneliness. There are poor people in other poorer countries in the world, and they suffer a lot. But they don't experience the loneliness that people experience in this country at an advanced age. And you see it particularly in big cities like New York, where Meals on Wheels comes up and knocks on the door, and a man or woman living completely alone. That's not living. And there are a lot of charitable agencies trying to correct that and trying to develop a more convivial, more community life for people of more advanced age. And if you can afford it, there are retirement villages, and a lot of recreation, and meals are taken care of, etc. But a lot of people can't afford it. I hesitate to even think of what this country would be like if it wasn't for Social Security, which these buccaneer Wall Street types are now trying to pressure Congress into increasingly privatize and undermine a very stable income stream by saying, well, why don't you let people put it in the stock market in a variety of ways so they can make even more commissions off these hundreds of billions of dollars of funds. And we've been fighting that in Washington, and AARP, I hope, will take a stronger stand because they got a lot of influence in Washington. There is a peace of mind aspect to this. And companies know what peace of mind is. They try to sell a lot of it in the marketplace. But when it comes to a steady retirement flow every month, and you know you're going to get it, and it is stable now right through 2034, to begin with, 2034, before the inflow is less than the outflow. And with very, very minor changes, very, very minor changes, that Social Security Trust Fund is good for almost the rest of the century. And there's very good studies showing how minor those changes have to be. But the loneliness is what attracted our attention when we started our Retired Professional Action Group in Washington back in 1971. There were all these people retiring from government, and they were accountants, and they were writers, and they were lawyers, and they were administrators, and they had nothing to do. And so we went to them and said, well, there's a lot to be done in this society, and now you're free at last, and you don't have to worry about the boss or anything like that. Why don't you join together? And they did, and eventually it melded into the Great Panthers organization. But ever since then, we've been thinking of ways by which people can become more active citizens and more powerful consumers after they retire, not only for their own benefit, tangible and intangible, but for the rest of the society that is composed of people who are rushed for time, back and forth, living frantic lives, having very little time for their civic responsibilities, unable to even challenge consumer fraud because, how many times have you heard this? I just don't have the time. I don't have the time to make the call. And you can't get through to business very easily anymore. You're put on voicemail, you have to press 1, press 2, press 3, and you press 3, you get another press 1, press 2, and it's very hard to get through this modern telecommunications age. I remember when I was growing up in a small town, I would pick up the phone and the operator would say, operator, and I say, 513, please. And I get through like this, before there was even a rotary phone. But now we got all kinds of telecommunication barriers. You can't get through. It's so bad now that sometimes when I'm working at night and I want to listen to classical music, I dial up United Airlines. And so about 9 years ago, we contacted Phil Donahue, and maybe it was 11 years ago now. And we said we have a great book. It's called Spices of Life. And it's about how all the wonderful things that retired people can do with their time. Not just in terms of their own pleasurable entertainment in a wholesome way, but helping youngsters. Developing ways that they can fight consumer fraud and preserve their modest family budget. Creating new activity in the community. Providing the experience and their skills to people half, third, or quarter of their age. All my historical knowledge, all the skills. I remember sitting by the side of an older gentleman when I was a little boy growing up in Connecticut, and he was an expert whittler. He knew how to whittle, and he created all kinds of little sculptures out of wood, and he showed me how he did it. I really treasure that. I treasure a lot of my time with older people when I was a little boy. And you know, now youngsters spend less time with adults than any youngsters in human history. They spend less time even with their parents. And they spend 30 hours a week in the hands of these corporate hucksters and video and television and all the rest of it. 3 teenagers, 30 hours a week, watching the screens, eating junk food that's promoted to them on the ads, not interacting with their family, not learning the arts of conversation, and not exercising their bodies. That's why, since records were kept in 1900, youngsters today are more out of shape and overweight than any youngsters since that 1900 date when the figures started being collected. And so we went on the Donahue show, and you know, he's great, microphone and all. And the reaction we got was really amazing after the show. And not only did all kinds of people ask for the book, Spices of Life, but they began putting it to work. And one man in Southern California started a poetry group. He was an electrician. He retired. He said, what am I going to do? And he heard some poets at some session once, and he said, I can do better than that. So he started writing poetry. And then he developed a whole circle of retired people writing poetry. That's creating one's own culture. That's not just gazing at some screen day after day. That's creating one's own culture. And we've got to extend that in many ways because it has very direct relevancy to the health of older people. Very, very direct relevance. End the loneliness, the isolation, the feeling of not being needed or wanted, not being valued for counseling and advice, and wisdom, experience, etc. You hear a lot about the information age these days, so always do softwares and computers and faster, faster, faster. Well, they're all focusing on information. But they're not moving enough to judgment, to experience, to knowledge, to wisdom. And that's what the opportunity, that's where the opportunity is. Now, about that same time, a man whose name is Nader Khan was trying to figure out how do you renew neighborhood ties in a community. And he said, well, you know, there are a lot of people who don't have money, but everyone has 24 hours a day. And so he developed this concept known as the time dollar. And the time dollar basically works this way. If elderly people, an elderly couple, let's say, tutoring a teenager, and they tutor a teenager for 50 hours. Those 50 hours are logged in a computer time bank run by a neighborhood group, credit union, civic association, whatever, community college. And when the elderly couple need help, they draw on 50 hours back. So they want their grass cut, or they want some help getting transported to the shopping areas, they draw on it. And that's called the time dollar exchange. And he started these in about 200 places all over the country, from Florida, El Paso to St. Louis. And what it did was it began to bring neighborhoods into more active interaction and mutual support with one another. And again, we took this to the Phil Donahue show, and one of the guests with us was a man who was a librarian. He had a serious stroke. It didn't affect his mind, but affected his body. And he became very, very depressed, sitting there all by himself in his apartment, and almost suicidal. And somehow this was a community with a time dollar program. And people wanted to start a library. So they learned that he was a former librarian. So they drew hundreds of hours of advice from him. And in return, he was able to draw for help. But what really he valued was not the hours that he had logged that he could get reciprocated. He valued that he met friends and neighbors who became part of his life. And strangers became friends. And you could see his expression on the Donahue show as to all the delightful new quality of life that he had because of the time dollar concept. Because there are all kinds of improvements in the lives of older people that have nothing to do with money. They don't require money. They require recognition that before even we had a money economy centuries ago, there were all kinds of relationships that were essentially gift relationships, that were relationships outside the market. And as we all know, more and more family functions are now being marketed, whether it's entertainment, whether it's daycare, whether it's counseling, whether it's feeding, family functions, because it takes two or more breadwinners to have a middle-class standard of living. Family functions are spilling into the marketplace, and people are having to buy what they once received free because they're commuting long distances and they're at work and they don't have much time left at home. The time dollar is something you may be interested in setting out in your community. There is a book that advises how to do it. There's a pamphlet that advises how to do it. There's software. But this man, Nader Green, has done it all. He's thought it up. He's actually negotiated time dollar programs to get set up in communities around the country. And there is a sign-up sheet out there, right there at the table. If you would print your name and address, I'll have them send you material on how you can start a time dollar in this area. I'm assuming there isn't one now. Is that correct? Right. In fact, he's coming out with another book that shows all kinds of non-market ways to build a prosperous society in realistic pursuit of happiness, so to speak. So there's a time dollar sheet out there. The second area I'd like to discuss is the consumer fraud. Consumer fraud is not just episodic. It's systemic. For many, many disreputable businesses, among the good businesses, that's the way they operate, day after day. And we have home equity frauds. We have home repair frauds that are very widespread in this country. We have telemarketing frauds that upset people, intrude on their privacy, expanding. And people don't know how to fight back. First of all, because they don't know what their rights are. They don't know how to get that telemarketing industry off their back. under an existing law. They don't know how, that they have a cooling off period, that if they suddenly sign on a door-to-door salesman situation that sells you something, there is a cooling off period of a couple days or so where you can reject the agreement that you signed in order to deal with the high-pressure sales tactics that the Federal Trade Commission has documented over the years. When you add up the consumer fraud in this country, that's deceptive ads, shoddy merchandise, financial overcharges, billing frauds, etc. You know what my guess is? My guess is that between 20 and 25% of income in this country goes down the drain. That's like a pay cut at the office or the factory. Let me give you one illustration. The General Accounting Office, the U.S. Congress, which is a very respected investigatory arm of Congress that investigates boondoggles and waste, etc., in the federal executive branch. They estimate that 10% of our health care bill is ripped off just by billing fraud and abuse. Those computer bills, where you're charged for what you didn't get, you're overcharged, it's all in code, you can't even understand it. Who can understand the bills anymore? You even get bank statements you can't understand. Utility bills you can't understand. You just write the check. You don't have time. Who's got the time to try to get someone who will answer? Press 1, press 2. And they get away with it as they wear you down. Now, you know what 10% of the health care bill this year is? This is just billing fraud and abuse. Never mind medical malpractice, never mind overprescription of drugs, never mind overcharging for drugs, etc. Just billing fraud and abuse. $100 billion with a B. With a B. That would almost cover most of the people in this country who don't have health insurance. That would cover about 70%. Big ticket item. There are poor elderly in our cities who are being mercilessly ripped off by furniture salespeople, by local merchants, paying enormous interest rates, etc. And we have a solution for that. It's called the Community Credit Union, of which there are 400 in the country, and there needs to be several thousand. Community credit unions are there for low-income people and to provide the immediate short-term loans that people need that the banks don't want to bother with. They like big loans to the big boys. The problem with dealing with consumer fraud is you get an occasional attorney general who cracks down, replaced by another attorney general who doesn't take much interest in it. The budgets are minuscule in terms of prosecution budgets. And most consumer fraud shows that crime pays. Auto repair fraud, home repair fraud, I mean, it's just endless. And a lot of it is just a way of doing business. It's just, let's give you an example. How many of you had a home repair firm come in and suddenly they say, gee, I need a piece of equipment. And they saunter out and they go out 5 blocks where they park their truck and they come back with exactly the piece of equipment they should have had in the first place. You're being charged by the hour. And then they sit down at the kitchen table and figure out what they charge you. And you're paying for that too. Now, see, that becomes a way of doing business. Just like medical malpractice was a way of doing business for years by doctors in such areas as unnecessary cesarean section operations, massive number of them, unnecessary hysterectomies, massive number of them. It's just a way of doing business. When consumer deception or consumer injustice becomes so widespread, it becomes institutionalized. say to the companies, why are you doing this? They sort of look at you with a blank look. Well, we've already done it. We've always done it. I know auto dealers who charge you $50 to prepare the bill when you buy a car. Imagine they're billing you for billing you. There was a woman in Southern California went to the hospital. She rented a television set, and they charged her $4 for billing her, in addition to the television set. That's where we're at. Now, how do you deal with consumer fraud? The first thing you do is you turn it into a major public issue. You see these town meetings up in New Hampshire during the New Hampshire primary, and people would stand up and they'd ask the questions that reflected the headlines in the paper. You know, what's your position on Social Security? What's your position on gun control? And what's your position on this and that? You almost never get a question on consumer fraud, which erodes family incomes from coast to coast, day after day. So we have to raise these issues. You see the political figures, the law enforcement officials, the elected representatives, Lansing, Washington. Ask them these questions, because when we go up to the Congress and try to get tougher consumer laws, you know what they tell us? They tell us, well, we go back home, we never hear about them. Our expectation level is so low that we don't even think that law and order is a prime responsibility applied to business fraud, not just street crime, by our elected and appointed officials. And we've got to start letting them hear about our complaints. There's no shortage of complaints. I get them every day in the mail. Other people get them all over the country. They haven't yet become visible enough to demand that there is law and order applied here. And I might add, the more prosecution there is of these, the more that television set, that news station is going to hire a consumer reporter. And the more news is going to come out, and the more pressure on the law enforcement officials as well. The second way to deal with consumer fraud is not a way that your governor is particularly interested in. It's to let the courts open up their doors so that people who are defrauding can go to court against their perpetrators who defrauded them or who harmed them and bring them to justice. And Governor John Engler has been the worst governor in the United States in closing the court. It is almost impossible to achieve justice now against an auto company that sells you a defective car that seriously injures you or members of the family in a court of law in Michigan. That's how restrictive are the laws that he championed and got through the state legislature and flamboyantly signed, surrounded by his business allies. Very unfair. By the way, none of these laws restricted the right of business to sue, just the right of you to sue. And that includes class actions. If you ripped off $200-300, you're not going to be able to find a lawyer to take your case. And if you are ripped off in a way where the small claims courts are not available for you, and you should all learn how to use small claims courts because you don't need a lawyer for that. What are you going to do? Well, what if the company ripped off 50,000 people like they ripped you off? And you add up 50,000 times 200-300. You can go to a lawyer who will file a class action. Class actions are now under attack. Right-wing corporate indentured members of Congress are trying to get class actions taken out of the state courts and put into the federal courts where they're even more difficult to pursue. You know, when our courts are closing off on us due to big business lobbying, that's like smashing an important pillar of our democracy. Our forebears fought King George III for their right of trial by jury. They put that number 2 on their complaint list after no taxation without representation. And now these corporations are coming in and saying, oh, you know, we got these legislators in tow, we got these regulators asleep on the job, Now we got to go after the courts because we can't quite control them. They're too decentralized. We can't control the juries who are making the factual decisions under the judge's supervision. We can't buy them. We can't rent them. We can't give them campaign contributions. Let me turn to the other issue of drug safety and drug pricing, which affects elderly people in a particularly intensive way. Number one, there is too much tragedy in this country from people who die or are seriously injured because of bad pharmaceuticals. Dr. Sidney Wolf, who heads our health research group, puts out periodically a book called Worst Pills, Best Pills. And the book is broken down in terms of ailments. If you have high blood pressure, if you have glaucoma, if you need a painkiller. He lists the approved drugs. Sometimes there's 10 of them set for high blood pressure. He lists the approved drugs, and then he points out, and there's never been a fact challenge in this book, 700 pages. He points out the medical studies show that drug A, which is designed for your ailment, also has a bad side effect. It can create nausea. It can cause you to fall and break your head. It can produce gastrointestinal bleeding. And he says that's a no-no. And then he shows the pharmaceuticals that are approved for the same ailment that don't have those serious side effects. That's a yes. That's why he called the book Worst Pills, Best Pills. This book is in the hands of millions of people. It's the most popular book ever featured on Phil Dunning. People gravitated to it because they're saying, what's wrong with it? I don't feel well since I took this prescription. And they say, well, this is why you don't feel well. Now, there are over 100,000 people in this country who die every year from the misprescription of pharmaceuticals. And a lot of them are in an advanced stage of age. And that total can be compared with 26,000 homicides last year. Almost 4 times the number of people subjected to homicide. The Food and Drug Administration is approving too rapidly drugs that aren't adequately tested out. Just last week, Dr. Wolf, after 18 months of work, got the Food and Drug Administration to ban the drug Resolute, which is used for diabetic patients, which was damaging livers and killing people. There are 2 or 3 other drugs that are for diabetics that don't damage your liver. Resolute was taken off the market by Warner Lambert under pressure from the FDA, finally. There's also a lot of health damage due to overprescription of pharmaceuticals. That's where the prescription is not properly measured for your particular needs, or they keep you on it for too long. All of this, of course, reduces your resistance to bacteria. You get antibiotic resistance, and that's creating a very serious problem in terms of always trying to develop more and more powerful drugs to deal with the antibiotic resistance problem of taking too many pharmaceuticals. Not only that, there are some people in this country who get more antibiotics by the meat and poultry they eat than by prescription drugs. Because the meat and poultry are pumped with these antibiotics for preventive purposes. They don't wait for the pig to get sick. They don't wait for the chicken to get sick. It's in the feed every day. It's part of the feed. And the transfer into your own body. The other point, of course, and by the way, the way to do this, I would love to give you a reference to a government publication that would list all of these drugs. You could get it easily. Do try to get that book, Worst Pills, Best Pills. I can't tell you how many people have been spared endless pain, if not death, because of this book. It's in the bookstore. It's called Worst Pills, best bills in paperback. It's very reasonably priced, and it's by Dr. Sidney Wolf and his associates. Now, how about drug prices? It's really interesting. The worst part about drugs is the death and injury they cause. But the biggest issue dealing with drugs now in the United States are drug prices. The issue, first of all, is why do our drug companies charge Mexicans and Canadians far less for exactly the same drugs that they sell to you? And the answer is because they can't get away with it in Mexico and Canada the way they can here. There are controls. There are controls. In fact, there are people in Buffalo who go to Hamilton to buy their pharmaceuticals. What do they do on the weekend? They drive to Hamilton, Ontario. Because they can save 1/3 to 1/2 on some of these prescription drugs. Well, here's how it works. In this country, they can charge whatever they want for drugs that they never developed. You developed them, the taxpayer. Give you an example. A woman writes us a few months ago with ovarian cancer. She's lost her $19,000 a year job. She went to the doctor. The doctor says, all I can do for you is prescribe Taxol, a drug that you have to have 6 shots for a series of treatments. And she said, how much is it? He said, about $14,000. Now that drug Taxol is being sold by Bristol Myers Squibb. They're going to get about $1 billion in revenues this year from that drug. Do you know who discovered that drug? Government scientists working with your tax dollars at the National Institutes of Health. $31 million, discovered that drug, tested it in human clinical trials, ready to go, and under our government policy, you can figure out who made it, they have to give it away to a drug company in a monopoly marketing agreement with no royalties back to the taxpayers to put into further research, no, 0, and no price restraints to the patient. So she has to pay that. And if she can't, she goes on Medicaid and the taxpayer pays for it at the other end. Taxpayer pays for the drug. Taxpayer pays for the Medicare to pay for the gouging price of the drug. And Bristol Myers Squibb laughs all the way to the bank. Are we going to allow this in the land of the free, home of the brave? How long are we going to stand for this? Many of the most important pharmaceuticals were not developed by the drug company, contrary to their propaganda. Drug companies, contrary to the propaganda, they were developed by your tax dollars in terms of grants to university scientists or to in-house government scientists. I suggest that that is another demand that your organization should be making. In addition to availing yourself of whatever price discounts the AARP drug prescription program affords you at the present time. But only so much that can do unless we get at the fundamental problem, which is that taxpayer-financed pharmaceuticals should be under strict price controls, number one. And second, that the drug industry should be subjected to the antitrust laws, that they should not have these long 20-year patent monopolies so that the generic companies can't compete with them. Now, Canada had a 5-year patent monopoly until Washington pressured Ottawa to get rid of the law, and that allowed what's called the generic drug industry. And the prices dropped precipitously after 5 years because there were more companies selling you the drug, not just one company having a monopoly. And again, by the way, if you want to get more information on all of this, log into the website citizen.org and look under Health Research Group. That has a regular newsletter that keeps people up to date on developments in this area. Health insurance. How many times have you heard we're the only Western country that doesn't have universal health insurance? There are too many Medicare gaps that have to be filled. The companies are like vultures circulating trying to persuade elderly people to get out of the traditional Medicare and go into their managed care. And now, even that is beginning to collapse of its own weight and its own greed, as many elderly people felt that they made the wrong choice. It's okay if you don't get sick, you know, just like anything else. If you don't get sick, you don't have to worry about what kind of coverage you have or you don't have. But when you do get sick, you'd want a complete package. We are the richest country in the world. We have the biggest economy. We have a record corporate profit 9 years in a row. We have a booming stock market. We have corporate executives that make 415 times more than the entry-level wage in their own country, in their own company, compared to 12 times in 1940, 40 times in 1980. Now they're paying themselves 415 times at the top corporate levels, the top 300 companies. What's our excuse for not having universal health care? We give foreign aid with U.S. tax dollars to countries who provide universal health care coverage to their own people in the third world. What's our excuse other than the greed of the health care industry, the giant HMOs, who tie the hands of doctors and nurses and keep them from applying their judgment on how to treat them, who in effect control everything for their own enrichment. That's what their goal is. Higher stock prices, higher stock option values, bigger executive compensation. They're paying themselves millions of dollars a year for one executive. What's our excuse? Our excuse is we haven't mobilized enough. Our excuse is not that we can't afford it. You know, in Canada, which we're trying to, you know, our companies are trying to undermine the Canadian system. They want to try to privatize it too. In Canada, they cover everyone from cradle through nursing home for 11% or less of their economy, between 10 and 11%. This year, our economy will devote 15% of its economy to health care, and 47 million people don't have it, including millions of children. Health care coverage. And 20 million are undercovered, the rest are afraid of falling through the cracks. Deductions, co-payments, exclusions, pre-existing conditions, and all the other crazy things that Canadians can't believe are going on here south of the border. But what's interesting is in Canada, you still have your free choice of doctor and hospital, which most people in this country have lost in an era of managed care. Our excuse is not lack of capacity. Our excuse is the citizens haven't mobilized enough and grabbed by the collar our elected representatives and said, we want it and we want it now. The way I like to call it, I don't like to call it single payer. I like to call it full Medicare for everybody, not Medicare with gaps. Full Medicare for everyone. People, children are dying every day in this country because they cannot afford health care. It has a direct, not just a financial impact, it has a direct impact. Study after study have shown that people who cannot afford health care, cannot afford preventive screening, pay a penalty. Sometimes the ultimate one. Nursing homes. We put out our first report on nursing homes, 1971. It's called The Last Segregation. At that time, it's $3 to $4 billion of tax money going into nursing homes and maybe 1 million people. It's a lot higher now, a lot higher. Again, part of it is asking, which nursing homes are better than other nursing homes? What's funny, church-run nursing homes tend to be more humane than the nursing home chains or private nursing homes. The commercial motive is not normally associated with compassion and with humaneness, which is why I don't think there should be a place in our healthcare for profit-seeking corporations. It should be non-profit. Because they can't resist putting profits before health care if the two collide. And of course, health care costs, therefore, if you cut back on health care costs at the expense of patients, you tend to produce more profit. There's an inherent conflict of interest. It's getting worse and greedier and seamier in its gluttonous momentum to increase the profitability. By the way, they're getting themselves into trouble. These giant HMOs, their stocks are down. They're starting to split apart. They're not well managed. And they've overextended themselves. They've alienated doctors and alienated nurses. They're being sued properly for using health care with their ridiculous protocols designed simply to keep more dollars in their profit column. So there's a transition now. 4 or 5 years ago, we were told it's inevitable, managed care, forget it, it's over, the HMOs are going to dominate. Suddenly, there's a lot of fragility here, a lot of instability, which spells an opportunity to do it right on this round in the recurrent rounds throughout our modern history of trying to get universal health care, starting even before President Truman proposed it in 1950. Nursing home perils. The laws are on the books. They're not adequately enforced. People who work in nursing homes are afraid to blow the whistle. They lose their jobs, and they're not being protected by the law. The law should protect people who see serious conditions in nursing homes and who take their information to the law enforcement authorities. For that civic duty, for that heroism, they should not be exposed to being fired or otherwise marginalized. These are laws that have been passed for water pollution and other whistleblowing arenas. Protecting the ethical whistleblower is important to securing a more safe nursing home environment for the residents. Of course, that's a terrible way to end up in a society that is organized in a different way. The extended family would nurture the elderly member of that family, but in our present economic system, can't do that, so you have to make the best of it. The other thing is, of course, a lot of nursing home residents are essentially drugged into submission. It's a way to keep down the number of employees you have to hire, right? You have the straitjacket, and that's a little too visible and nasty, so you simply pump them full of all kinds of tranquilizers, etc. Many of you have been in bad nursing homes, and it's pretty shocking. It's not just shocking to the senses, it's shocking to our collective sense of shame that we allow these matters to occur. And along comes the physician-assisted suicide movement, with HMOs having an economic incentive to end the drain, and you really have a terrible combination operating with, fortunately, a growing resistance. Let me just add this additional point here. A lot of the problems which you're dealing with every day have causes. And you're dealing with the most immediate causes. But there are causes that lead to causes that lead to causes. And we don't have any institutional structures in this country to go back to the basic causes of why these things ricochet all the way to the tragedies, to the needs, to the desperation that many of you have to ameliorate or service. And that's what we try to point out, that the maldistribution of power and wealth in this country has never been greater in the last 60 years. The few are reaping most of the gains of economic growth in our country. The top 1% of the richest people in our country have financial wealth equal to the combined financial wealth of the bottom 95% of people in this country. The majority of workers in this country are making less in inflation-adjusted dollars today than they made 20 years ago, notwithstanding 10 years of economic growth. Consumers are so beleaguered trying to make ends meet. They're into debt $6.2 trillion, all-time record. And we have 20% of our children growing up in poverty. In the Netherlands, it's 3%. In Sweden, it's under 2%. And they're ashamed of it. 20%. In the District of Columbia, our nation's capital, it's over 30%. In California, it's 25%. These inequities and disparities are such that they ricochet down to the service level all over America, with people in desperate straits who live in the richest country in the world. What do you say about the millions of Americans who have worked for years in this country and are essentially broke, except for future Social Security? They're broke. The bottom 120 million Americans in income have a combined wealth equal to Bill Gates, one man. Bill Gates' wealth is equal to the combined wealth of the bottom 45% of our population. Apart from what that says about the great software imitator from the state of Washington, what does that say about millions of people who work year after year are essentially broke? When you're broke and you have desperate needs in terms of your health, your safety, your health care, etc., what are you going to do about it? Other than have to suffer if you don't have coverage. And of course, the poor pay more, as they always have. Let me end on this note. We have to create new citizen organizations in every area of our political economy, every area of our economy. We don't have enough of them. You ask yourself in Michigan, how many powerful groups are there in Michigan to deal with the problems that consumers have? There aren't many. There are specialized agencies that are funded by tax money, trying to do a good job. But basically, our democracy rests on the backs of organized, informed citizens. We see that in the civil rights groups. Who launched the civil rights movement other than the heroic people who refused to go to the rear of the bus? It was a citizen group called the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, that brought those great Supreme Court cases decades ago. And who's defending our civil liberties? It's a private group called the American Civil Liberties Union. And who got the environmental and consumer laws through in the 60s and 70s? Citizen group. But we don't have enough of them. And they're being overwhelmed by these corporate trade organizations and the political action committee money and a concentrated media that doesn't pay attention to serious problems in their reporting every day on television and radio because they can make too much money entertaining and selling ads. Let's look at your late evening news. I don't even have to look at your late evening news to tell you what it is. It's the same all over the country. 30 minutes, 9 minutes of ads, 4 minutes of sports, 4 minutes of weather, including 3 installments giving you the tease, 1 minute of chit-chat between the anchors, several street crime stories to launch the evening news, maybe a couple stories from City Hall, maybe an animal story, maybe a story about a medical journal that's come out with a new result. And that's it. Is that what went on in your community? All kinds of things go on in your community. Many good things. Citizens trying to rehabilitate neighborhoods, trying to have affordable housing, trying to help elderly people with new modes of transportation to get to where they want to get because they can't drive a car. There are all kinds of things. Never gets on the evening news. There's very few exceptions. And by the way, that TV station is using your property, the public airways. The public airways belong to us, and the Federal Communications Commission rents them to the radio and TV stations. You know how much they rent them for? Zero. Billions of dollars of your public airways property are given away every year to the radio and TV stations. We're the landlords, they're the tenants. They keep us off our property 24 hours a day, and then they tell us what they want us they want to tell us. They tell us what they want to tell us. We have to raise our expectation levels. We should have a citizen media group here in Michigan, right? They can go to work on these radio and TV stations saying, why aren't you hiring more reporters? Why aren't you covering this? Why aren't you giving us a voice? Why aren't you letting us have our report transmitted to the community after we worked so hard to put out a report on a bad situation that we want to correct? There is no media citizen group. That's what I mean by more media. We helped start a nursing home citizen group out of Washington, which has connections all over the country with people who want to watchdog nursing homes, who want to be able to rate them and give information to people who are considering going into a nursing home, or their children considering having to go into a nursing home, so that they have an idea of which ones are better than the others. And that group for 30 years, the woman who started it is still working there. I want to talk about dedication. That group has done very good work, but much more work would be done if there was a group at every state level with more local challenges. That's what I mean by more citizens. How can we do that? By telling our government that it has a responsibility to facilitate the formation of these citizen groups. Our government doesn't have to wait to be asked to use our tax dollars for corporate welfare, for subsidizing, bailing out all kinds of corporations, many of them the richest in the world, like Daimler Chrysler in Toledo.
Yes.
$281 million federal, state, and local subsidy package for a new Jeep plant, when this company has $20 billion in cash in the bank, bringing the city of Toledo to its knees, already financially strapped metropolitan area. Big guy doesn't pay property tax called Daimler Chrysler. But it's okay, the small business and homeowners, they got to pay the property tax for the schools, other services. But when you say, what are you doing, government, to facilitate? There are government mailings that come to us all the time, don't they? Motor vehicle registration mailings, tax mailing. Why don't they put inserts in these mailings, inviting people to join their own civic organization? They don't even have to have any tax dollars. These people will join with their own dues if they have an easy way to join in an area that they're interested in. Auto insurance, for example, or housing, or health care. It should be on the cable TV. We give them a monopoly license, don't we? The cable companies? Well, why aren't they required to give us an opportunity to join these civic groups without having to pay through the nose for the advertisements? There are lots of ways to do it, and it has been done in a couple areas in some states, so we know it works. In Illinois, there were inserts in the electric telephone gas company back 18 years ago. 200,000 people joined, $5 a person. They hired their own economists and lawyers, and in 1993, their economists and lawyers negotiated with Commonwealth Edison in Chicago for a $1.3 billion refund. Because they were overcharging Northern Illinois families. That's what a citizen group can do. We have an underdeveloped democracy and an overdeveloped plutocracy ruled by the rich and powerful. And I hope that those of you who want to stay connected with some of the points made here, if you sign the time dollar sheet, will get you time dollar information. There'll be another sheet, someone can make another sheet called Worst Pills, Best Pills, tell you how you can get information about drugs, drug prices, etc. And to remember that we all have an obligation to strengthen our democracy and hand it in a stronger way to future generations. And the pursuit of justice is very much the pursuit of happiness. You really can't have much happiness in society that doesn't have much justice. And we have an opportunity in our country, given our Constitution and our forebears and their great successful struggles for justice over 200 years, to do likewise and build a better society for everyone. Thank you.
Before we break for lunch, we are going to have some question and answer time.
I understand, I know you're running for the President of the United States of the Green Party. And I was just wondering if you could make some statements on it. I know several of us out here are circulating each other's party. I know you're very informal about this. I think you're real serious, and I'd like to have you verify that. And we want Senator Ballot.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, since you asked, yes, this is a very serious campaign. And we're going coast to coast on getting out as many state ballots as possible. It might not surprise you that Michigan has serious ballot hurdles that have to be overcome with lots of petition signatures. But we just think that the two parties have become so look-alike and so indifferent to so many problems of people in this country. There has to be a new political progressive movement. Thank you.
Help us do it, please. Thank you.
Mr. Nader, I have something to relate to you. I live by myself in HUD housing, and I'm totally blind. And about 4 years ago, there's this bus called Lake Erie Transit. It's like a dollar ride system. You send it down from Monroe, and I have very limited transportation on how I can get around. That's why I'm not able to work. But they were going to lose the bus, and they voted the levy to where it wouldn't pass. So I got upset because I wasn't just thinking of me. I was thinking of handicapped people and seniors and kids and school kids and stuff. And I talked to I called Lansing, and I talked to the aide to Senator Berryman. I talked to the aide to two other politicians, Beverly Hamstrong and another, I can't remember his name right now, but anyways. I talked to them. They didn't come down. We had a public hearing. I tried to get the person to come down from the National Federation of the Blind. I was like too far away from their chapter. I tried to get somebody to come down from the wheelchair organization. They wouldn't come down. I sent flyers to like all the people, the TV stations up in Detroit. I called them. I called the ones in Toledo. I sent them flyers, and I talked to 91, FM 91. It's a public radio station. The guy came down and did an interview. There was like two people from Channel 24 and 13. They did an interview. I was in the Blade. I was in the Monroe Guardian. I was in the Bedford Press. And because of all this stuff, the bus got saved.
Oh,
I
how
had very
wonderful.
little help.
How wonderful. There it is. There's a citizen's determination. And in the middle of her description, I thought it was going to be a loss. And she turned it right around, you see. She didn't let defeat 1, 2, 3 stop her. She was resilient. Someday we'll have citizen groups that deal with public transit for all people, and adequate public transit. Just amazing. Again, the richest country in the world, and there are people with disabled who can't get to where they have to go. It's a shame. We've got to put this country back in the hands of the people, not in the hands corporate and other powerful interests who just look out for their own greed.
Mr. Mayor, this question was presented to us. How do seniors lobby for better Medicare reimbursements? The gap between what Medicare pays and what practitioners charge is causing a problem for seniors.
Well, that is a problem, and you just have to increase the pressure on Congress. Congress is extremely sensitive to the elderly vote, and AARP has shown that its power, and I wish it was a bit more aggressive on this issue, but there's no doubt in my mind that if they decide to make an all-out effort, they would prevail because they have so many members and they can flood the Congress with calls and letters and emails, etc. The Congress is torn in a lot of directions. There's a lot of money flowing up on Capitol Hill, trying to get them to do the wrong thing. But this is something that requires a regulation that, in effect, prevents that gap from occurring. It's very hard when you have a public system and a private system coexisting, the way you do with Medicare and private medicine. Then there's a bridge with managed care, taking away Medicare beneficiaries into the managed care. But until we get universal health care, we don't have these gaps. We have to have regulation, and that's Congress. And that means a lobby of citizens to get it done. You've got a senator who's running for re-election, make him run even faster. That's when they'll listen to you. This is when they want you one day out of every 4 years. That's what they want. Take advantage of it. It's an election year.
Mr. Nader, thank you for coming to our little community here. I had a question on national health care. You did a lot of, shall I say, berating of the private system. And what reason is there to suppose that the public system would be any better? I'll give you an example. My wife was at the county health department, and our son almost got the wrong medicine, and she happened to notice that it was different from what it was supposed to be. I haven't seen anything in my studies that would show that. And that's just an anecdotal thing, of course. But as I was saying, I don't have anything in my background to show that socialized, or as you call it, a national health care system would be better than a private. One of the examples commonly given is that Canadians who can afford it come to the United States to get health care when it's more than just a routine job. You get instructed about how they can't get in to get health care when they want it and so on. So perhaps you could address how you think it's...
Let me answer that. Well, public bureaucracies can be abusive like private corporations, but private corporations are not dedicated to cover everyone in need, everyone who needs health care. A national system is. You then have rough edges, and you've got to deal with it. They're not going to perform perfectly. But let me address the Canadian issue. The Conservative government in Ottawa for years cut the federal payments to the provinces, which resulted in a shortfall. As a result, for instance, 42 hospitals in Ontario were closed. 42. Let's say maybe 10 should have been closed because of excess capacity. They closed down 42, and as a result, there were some long waits for hospital care. But there's no longer wait than when you don't have any money to pay for it. And there are enough people here who wait forever because they can't afford it. The solution in Canada is to take it back to the investment level that it was per capita. When the federal government cut out the payments to the provinces, everything tightened up. I must say, though, that there are Canadians who come down here for specialized services. I know a lot of Americans who go up to Toronto for hernia operations because they got the most specialized hospital in the world. They get it a lot cheaper. I know a lot of people who go up there and want to use the Canadian Medicare, which unfortunately is a fraudulent thing. They get away with it. And there are many Americans who have that Ontario or other provincial Medicaid so they can get treatment. I think it's not the system that's creating the delays, it's the underinvestment by a right-wing government that hasn't been yet corrected by the Liberal Party that has run Canada for several years. Now they're pumping more money into it. They just announced they're pumping several more billions of dollars. But just remember, they're covering everyone for a smaller share of the economy than we spend covering maybe 75–80% of the people. And you know how they do it? Their administrative costs are much, much lower than ours. 24 cents out of every dollar spent on healthcare in this country goes to administrative costs. Billing, collection, accountants, all the rest. In Canada, they do it on 10 cents of every dollar. Because most Canadians who get healthcare, I have a friend the other day, he broke his hip, he went in, he had an x-ray, he had an operation, he had rehabilitation. He said it cost him $50 because it's a tax-supported system. And he told me how most Canadians never see a bill. They go and have health care, never see a bill. You know, the bills we see, sheaf after sheaf, and you can't understand them. That reflects a huge cross-current of bill assignment, collections, and this and that. That's why we have so much administrative expense. The key thing I like about the Canadian system is it gives you your free choice of doctor and hospital. And we're losing that in this country. By the way, that story you just heard on the bus, did you see that success story on your local evening news?
Oh, no.
See, why not? If somebody commits a street crime, they're on the evening news. Someone saves a bus for disabled elderly people, and that's not worthy of 2 minutes or a minute and a half on the evening news. Okay? But they'll tell you what the weather is in British Columbia. And, you know, this weather fanaticism is really amazing, isn't it? The way they tease you, and hey, it might be a good weekend, stick around, we'll tell you in 5 minutes. Have all the Doppler radar and everything. And they really get upset when there's no hurricane. And then they tell you the different temperatures between suburbs that are 3 miles apart, you know, and that it was maybe quite more than 20 years ago. That's valuable time that can be used to demonstrate to the audience the heroic activities of citizens, such as the woman's victory on the bus that you just heard about. We've got to be more demanding. How many of you pick up the phone and call your local television station or call your local radio station saying, hey, I'm your owner. You understand? I own the public area with millions of Americans. Put some more reporters on. Cover this neighborhood. Why didn't you cover this issue? Why did you black out this activity? If they start getting calls, they'll start listening. In fact, there's a rule of thumb that for every complaint, there's 100 people who didn't call to complain. So they multiply your calls. Don't think it's just me, what's one call. Just do it routinely. You know, like you get up in the morning and you drink some water, get on the phone, chew out the local TV. Radio.
Talk about universal health care, and we talk about so many countries. I think you mentioned Switzerland, Canada, where they have universal health care, where everyone is covered. Well, I was reading an article about Canada. That they said Canada has more international relations with more different countries than any other country in the world. But I just wonder, is this universal health care, does it cover the Canadian citizens or cover everyone in Canada? That's what I'm wondering. It's kind of difficult because in this country, you know, they usually copy the best of everything, you know, in here. If there's something good, they'll copy it and make it better. Something good, they'll copy it and make it better. And Canada has a better system, why haven't we copied it and made it better?
Because the people who control healthcare policy, the drug companies, until recently the AMA, the big HMOs, the health hospital chains don't want it. They're making too much money. In Canada, there are price controls that operate to contain the greed. Most Canadian physicians can't make more than $400,000, $450,000 a year. You got physicians in this country who break $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. I heard of a cardiologist in Redding, California. He was doing heart catheters. He's making $3 million a year. He made more, his nurse told me, he made more in one day than she made in 1 year. So that's the difference. They, back in the 60s, decided that health care was a right. They're going to have universal health care, and everyone's going to have equal access to whatever doctors and hospitals they chose to ask to be treated by. We had a similar struggle in this country, and we came up with Medicare and Medicaid, a part of the system, We didn't do the whole system. And we've been stuck ever since. But we're going to get it, there's no doubt. We've got to believe we're going to get it. And then we'll pay attention to the medical malpractice problem, which is taking 80,000 lives a year just in hospitals alone, according to the Harvard School of Public Health physician study. And you know, elderly people were subjected to medical incompetence, like medical malpractice. They don't have much wage loss, they don't have much income loss, etc. And so they don't get legal representation the way people say in their 30s and 40s who were crippled or seriously harmed by a negligent or incompetent doctor or hospital. And that's a problem that we ought to pay more attention to, because a lot of elderly people are being subjected to malpractice. You know, you just need 10% of the doctors to be incompetent or negligent or worse to affect millions of patients. I mean, just think how many patients 10%, say, of the doctors who are bad deal with. And the doctors don't discipline themselves. The licenses are very, very rarely taken away, even for the most outrageous negligent deaths and injuries. And that is something it has been given very little attention. Medical malpractice among elderly patients. Yes.
Mr. Nader, I was on Breslin. I was happy to hear about this book that you told me about, but I thought that the Food and Drug were not allowed to sell us these pills until they perfected that there were not these adverse side effects, which it's very frightening because now they want me to take Avandia, which they say is the still chemical makeup of resin. But down the road, they don't know how it's going to affect me. Aren't they supposed to be, I don't know how to do it, but aren't they supposed to be having some kind of way to test them before they give them to us? Are we here guinea pigs?
Yes, the Food and Drug Administration is supposed to require the demonstration before marketing a new drug that it's safe and that it's effective. Safe and effective. The problem is, under Reagan-Bush deregulation, under Clinton's easy non-regulation, the Food and Drug Administration has been rushing approvals of new drugs to market at a record pace, and they're now beginning to get egg on their face. Because now, increasingly, drugs are being taken off the market, should never have been put on the market after people have died. So they, as you say, some people were used as guinea pigs. The medical literature showed that Breslin was a no-no drug 2 years ago. Our health group filed a formal petition with all kinds of documentation in 1998 asking the FDA to take that drug off the market. The drug companies are very influential in Washington. They've got their friends in Congress and they've got their friends in the administration. So the FDA took its sweet time and more people died. More people died from liver damage. And then 2.5 weeks ago, Dr. Wolf wrote a tough letter to the FDA urging criminal prosecution of the drug company on resin. And I guess that got their attention, and they took it off the market.
What do right to food and drug, are they going to pay attention to us?
Well, the immediate thing, if you're on a prescription, is to check with that Worst Pills, Best Pills book, which has hundreds of prescriptions. Ones you shouldn't take, and ones you can take more safely. The second thing is, make it an issue every time you see an elected official or someone running for office. Raise it constantly. Write letters, protest. 200,000 people protesting on any major issue in this country would have a decisive effect. But for your own personal safety, you can't wait for the FDA. You got to get authoritative sources such as the Health Research Group. Also, talk radio could do more on this. Have you ever heard of Paul W. Smith's talk radio in Detroit? There you are. Why, I bet you Paul W. Smith's mother is in the audience. Is Paul W. Smith's mother in the audience? There she is. Yes.
I think my son Paul tries very hard to get behind this thing.
Indeed. Paul W. Smith has all kinds of people on the program who talk about consumer protection and clean politics. But let me tell you something. There aren't many Paul W. Smiths around the country. They're all now right-wing talk hosts. They're all trying to imitate Rush Limbaugh, who doesn't exactly tell you things you need to know that might upset big business who pay his freight.
I'm very glad that you're here today. I have a question concerning the time dollar concept.
Yes, sir.
With the income tax forms, people are supposed to list bartering and put a dollar value there. What danger is there for federal intervention to the time dollar concept?
Good question. The question is, if you barter something with someone else, it's got to be imputed as an income. You should report it. But Edgar Kahn, who is a professor of law, got an opinion from the IRS declaring time dollar exchanges inherently charitable and tax exempt. So you do not have to report it. Inherently charitable and tax exempt. Thanks for answering that question, because that could be a lot of paperwork otherwise. Yes.
Yes, thank you for renewing our awareness how, as individuals, we have a responsibility for making change happen. What can we do as citizens to, say, eliminate what I call the legalized bribery of lobbyists with our government officials?
You mean lobbying expenses or financing campaigns? Or both? Well, yeah.
What I consider binary questions.
Yeah, well, I think, it's just logical, isn't it? Public schools are funded by public money. Public parks are funded by public money. Public elections should be funded by public money. We'll never make a better investment. There are these companies, they pump $1 million into Congress, senators, representatives, campaign coffers, and they'll get $20 billion or so in tax breaks. Or they'll get non-enforcement of the safety laws. So what does a federal election cost? It costs about $2.5 billion every 4 years, and less than that every 2 years for the congressional House election and some Senate election. That's nothing compared to the billions and billions of dollars that are drained away from taxpayers for vested corporate interests, corporate welfare, giveaways, subsidies, etc. Not to mention non-enforcement of critical health and safety, environmental laws. And I would propose public financing the campaigns in a voluntary way. For example, you could have a checkoff on a 1040 tax return up to $100 to put into a public financing fund. And if you don't want to pay, you don't have to. If you want to put in $50, fine. $75, fine. And that would produce enough money. especially if the campaign finance reform legislation included free time on TV and radio for ballot qualified candidates. Because a lot of money goes to buy the TV time, and that's the least that the radio and TV stations can do for using our public airways free of charge year after year, decade after decade. And once that happens, cracking down on lobbying abuses by special interests, which is a special area, would come almost as a matter of course. The big thing is public financing of public campaigns. You want to know how it works? Let's say you're a company that exports weapons to other countries. This isn't the Pentagon to other countries. This is private corporations. They want to sell fighter planes, tanks, ammunition. Here's the way they play the game. They develop a political action committee. They fund key members of key committees in Congress, who then pass laws making sure that every year $6 billion of your tax money subsidizes the private corporate exports of weapons to other countries around the world, some of which are used against our own soldiers. So that's the way the game works. Why, in a period when there isn't enough nutrition for poor kids, there isn't enough public transportation for elderly and disabled, there isn't enough all kinds of basic needs, what are we doing allowing these corporations to control our government and to seize our hard-earned tax dollars to make the rich corporations richer? The answer? We're not paying enough attention to our citizen duties. And if we each say to ourselves, I'm going to spend so many hours a year on this area or that area, and I hope others will do likewise, and I'm going to join existing citizen groups and lock arms with others, we turn this country around. So every time there's a serious problem in our country's history and citizens mobilize, they turn it around. Who built the middle class? The workers who formed trade unions. That's who built the middle class. You know? Who curbed the greed of the banks and the railroads over 120 years ago? The farmers who organized this great populist progressive movement that we're still benefiting from. By the way, since I've got several questions on what can we do, we have a book called Civics for Democracy. And although it's used in classrooms, it really shows you all kinds of techniques on how you can prevail as citizens. How to do a news conference, how to use the Free Information Act, how to build coalitions, etc. And you can get the address on how to get that by logging into essential.org, the website essential.org, if it isn't in your library. It's called Civics for Democracy. You know, someday what I hope happens in this country is we have classes we can go to at a community college, night school, adult education, or even just clinics, where we learn citizen skills, where we learn how to be effective citizens. People say to me, I can't get this report on a nursing home. What can I do? And I say, well, you know, Michigan has a free information. Oh, I didn't know that. And you know, it only takes you about 30 minutes to learn how to use the Free Information Act and write a letter to get that file. Oh, I didn't know that. You didn't learn that in high school? No. You didn't learn that in college? No. We don't learn citizen skills. They're not all that hard to learn. You know, we want to be doctors, engineers, mechanics, accountants. We learn skills to become those. But for the most important duty of all, the duty of an effective, informed citizen in a democracy, how come they don't teach us these things? What is wrong with our educational system? Is it because it'll upset City Hall? It'll upset the company on the Hill? If we learn how to challenge them, as is our right in democracy when they abuse their powers? Citizen skills. You have a community college here, just have a meeting with the president of the community college and say, will you have a course at night on civic skills? You can't believe how many people would sign up for that course. People are sick and tired of being powerless. They want more power, and they should have more power. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the disparity between the growth of CEO income levels as opposed to entry-level positions. You had mentioned the trade unions that build the middle class. I see some UAW jackets in this room. It's such a quality of life issue, maybe not for the elderly people in this room, but certainly for their children and their grandchildren. You know, what are some of our options? Because the income levels just seem to be dropping in comparison, and the middle class seems to be disappearing, certainly for my children.
Yes, I mean, imagine there are children of UAW workers who are not going to make as much as their parents. Here's the answer. We have got to repeal the notorious Taft-Hartley law and other laws that make it more difficult to form a trade union in the United States of America in the private sector than any Western country. That's what we got to do. And when that happens, Walmart's employees will be unionized, and they might say, you know, we really can't support a family on $6.80 an hour, bro. And that's what you've got to get your representatives to stand up and answer. When are you going to give us the trade union collective bargaining laws that Canadians have, and Germans, and French, and British workers have, who have a much higher membership of trade unions in their economy than we do? We're at a 60-year low, and it's still declining. And so that's the one thing that can be done. Then the workers will take it on the next step. You know what? If you're in a factory now, or an office that's not unionized, let's say you're in Walmart. You have Walmarts here? Okay. Let's say 3 or 4 workers out of the dozens in the hyper store at Walmart decide they want to form a union. So they get the petitions that the NLRB, National Labor Relations Board, provide, and they start going to their fellow workers for signatures. That's the first step. There are a lot of other hoops they have to go through. In Canada, all you got to do is petition the workplace, you get a majority, you got a union. Not in the U.S. Now let's say they're starting to get their workers to sign. The manager says, what are you doing? He says, well, we're trying to use our legal right to form a union. You're fired. Right. These workers then have to hire, pay a lawyer, appeal to the National Labor Relations Board. It takes 3.5 years to get reinstated, and then all they do is get their back pay. But how about their legal expenses? And what do you think the other workers are going to think watching this process? Okay? There's no punitive damages for being fired for what? For exercising the right to form a union? That's an example of why we need labor law reform. And that's an example. I met a UAW worker who lost his job because the Terrytown plant in New York closed down for General Motors. And I said, what have you been doing? He said, well, I've got long severance pay, I've got pension rights, and I'm training myself for another job. But he said, I didn't lose my house, I didn't lose my car, I'm still feeding my family. And you know why? It's 3 letters, that's why. UAW. That's why. And there aren't enough unions in this country to take on these giant corporations and their allies, and therefore, check this out. Almost 50 million people in this country, out of 132 million workers, are making less than $10 an hour. Try and support a family on that. Look at your auto insurance, the cost of the car just to get to work. Try and support a family.